Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to TikTok, where we make sense of personal finance. Today, I have Acquania Escarne, who is the founder and CEO of RRD Investments and the creator of The Purpose of Money. I met her over at FinCon in New Orleans this year, so really excited to have her on the show. Acquania, to kick things off, I would love to hear just a little bit about your story on how you got started into the personal finance world.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a long one. Back in the day when I was, no, I'm just kidding. When I was a kid. No, so where do I start? Honestly, my interest in personal finance is probably where I should start because my dad gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which many people have read. But at 16, this was the eye opener for me. In high school, I decided I am going to retire early and I'm going to start saving now. So I read the book. My first job was a retail cashier at a strip mall clothing store, and I used my first check to open a Roth IRA. And that experience kind of like sparked my family's interest in me and my money story, and like how did I know to do that at such a young age? And so I had a passion for personal finances since high school, since reading that book. But getting into the personal finance space and social media and in educating others came much later. It was actually in 2015 when I came back after living in Dubai for 3 years with my family because my job sent me over there. I read an article that said Americans don't have $500 saved for an emergency. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is how much it takes to wreck their budget, send them to payday loan locations or credit card debt to pay for bills. And I was like, $500? Like, I can help people save $500. So I went on Facebook and I did what I call a Facebook savings challenge. Every week, I was posting content to encourage people to save $1 more than they did before. And if you started with just $1 the first week and you ended with $52 the last week, you'd have more than 500 saved for an emergency. So that's literally how it started. And people started following me, cheering me on and saying, thanks for the tips. And I turned that savings challenge into I want to be a personal finance writer. So I Googled, how do you become a personal finance writer? Got my first writing gig about 3 months after I started the savings challenge. And the rest is history. I've gone from writing to life insurance to investing in real estate and telling everyone about it online. So it's a mix of high school and 2015, but all of those moments were pivotal in my decision to help people with their finances.
Yeah, I gotta say it's inspirational to hear that you did that in high school. I remember I got my first job in high school. I started making some money, but I was paying for gas and trying to figure out what to do with that stuff. So for you to go and invest in a Roth, did you have any direct? I mean, other than Rich Dad Poor Dad, but did you have any direction from your parents, or was that just you're gonna go figure this out and start investing in one?
So no, it was the book. My dad was pretty savvy, but like in the military and still traveling at the time.
Okay.
So he was living, well, actually by then, I think he was living in Georgia with me again, but it wasn't like him telling me, do invest in these funds and do this. It was more so just like set it up. The book he said, literally read this. And then that was it. My dad is a man of very few words. So, I read the book and then I literally went to my bank and was like, I've had an account here since I was 5. I just read about this Roth IRA thing so I can have tax-free dollars in the future. Like, can you help me set it up? And the lady did. And she really thought I was crazy. She was just like, how old are you? And why are you trying to do this? So I told her about the book. But yeah, a lot of people were sort of scratching their head. And I was like, look, I'm very clear on what I don't want to do, which is work forever. And I don't know what more I can do other than start early and take advantage of time.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I didn't even have a lot of money. I used my first paycheck. It was about $252. And then I used my other paychecks for gas
Yeah.
and, going out with friends that summer. But afterwards, I did make an effort to make contributions. So I would save my change all year. And then my mom and I would sit and roll the coins. Literally, like when I say save
That's
my
cool.
change, this is before Digit, this is before Acorns.
Yeah.
I was putting change in like a jar. And then in December, we would roll the coins and then we would take them to deposit them to the Roth. Or I would save my babysitting money, or, when I was in college and I was a work study student, I would try to save 25 bucks a month, if that. But I didn't pressure myself to be on any type of automatic contributions. I just said, look, you know that you make money throughout the year. How much of it can you save for retirement? And that was my initial goal. And then it wasn't until I got into my career as a diplomat and I had a steady paycheck that I committed to monthly contributions and to maxing it out. So I always try to tell people, like, you don't have to start with $1 million to be able to
Mhm.
invest. You literally can start with $200 or $25 or $50 and
Yeah.
then do as much as you can, as often as you can. And that was what led to success for us.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I think that's a really good message for everybody because I think a lot of people talk about putting away $20 or
Mhm.
$25, but really they're making a ton more. So it's hard to give the advice to where they haven't actually been in that situation before. How do you invest and save when you only have $20 or $25 to save? So that's cool to hear something like that from you.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's hard, and I know there's always that temptation to say I don't have enough to do that.
Mhm.
But I feel like, look, you can't afford not to do it, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's going to retire at some point, God willing, and no one's going to give you a loan to do it. And I hate to say it, but the reality is a lot of people these days are being forced to retire because their health is making it difficult for them to keep working. So I feel like while you're young and healthy, even if it's a little painful in the moment, put the 5, 10, 25 aside. And then as you make more money, then you can save and invest more money. And you have to be really disciplined in that part, though, right?
Mhm.
Because, of course, we get pay raises from time to time and we're tempted to spend more, but we actually need to think to ourselves, like, am I already making enough to cover my bills? And can I actually save more instead?
Yeah.
And that's where you get to see the real compounding. But I would say, seeing the money grow was my motivation. I know everyone's motivated by different things, but for me, it was seeing it grow and being able to see that, like, back in the day, I used to do 25 bucks a year or 75 bucks a year. Now I'm maxing it out. Now I'm seeing six figures in savings, six figures in investments. And I'm like, okay, but it took time. And I'm a very, like, set it and forget it kind of person. Like, set it, stay to it, discipline. What can I commit to doing, and
Yeah.
then when can I raise it? And then when I see the fruits of the labor, then I'm like motivated to actually do even more, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you have to know what your triggers are. Some people may see it and want to spend it, so you have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, that's really good advice too for everybody watching. So, taking a step back just a little bit to the businesses that you've really created from that journey you started in high school. So I know I mentioned already investments and the purpose of money, but where else? Or I guess could you maybe tie together how those are connected with you as you're running all of those, and what other businesses you have in the
Yeah,
personal
no,
finance space?
that's actually a great question. And it's a little complicated sometimes, depends on the day, which one I'm working on the most. But just to give you some background, RRD Investments is named after my three boys, Rudolph, Rashad, and Dylan. That's my husband, my son, and my son. And I started it initially as a firm to invest in real estate and to teach people about investing in real estate. So RRD Investments started out with rentals and joint
Mhm.
ventures with other real estate investors. It has since kind of morphed into, there's legs, right? There's the educational leg where on social media via the purposeofmoney.com, I talk about personal finance and my journey in building wealth through life insurance and real estate investing. And then I have the ability to provide coaching for anyone who needs coaching. That has sort of become the pillar that now pays my bills, because RRD Investments is how I invest. It's also how I teach and talk. And then I have some digital courses on insurance, on personal finances. But recently, I would say like in the last 3 years, I also created an email marketing business. It started out as I don't want to say hobby, but a client that I did freelance writing for actually decided to launch a digital product, an ebook, and asked me to do some emails to promote it. And then it turned into me becoming his ghostwriter full time and ghostwriters to him and all his friends.
Okay.
So he helped me build a 6-figure email marketing business that I kept a secret literally until this year.
Wow.
And I can't even tell you why I did that. I was just comfortable with the amount of clients I had and the people I was helping. Some of them didn't want people to know they weren't writing their own stuff. So there's that issue. But it was fun. I'm a good writer. I love to write. I love to read. I love to tell people stories. And I love story based email marketing. So I kind of took all of that and made it a business. And so now you haven't seen the website yet because it's in the works, but there's the purpose of money, the purpose of money and the purpose of email.com, where I will talk about literally how you can leverage emails to grow your business, to nurture your audience, and to help the world. And so we're building generational wealth one email at a time. That's the tagline for that business. So it has been crazy because most people would focus on one business. I tend to kind of focus on a lot at the same
Yeah.
time. And it has been okay. I think sometimes I want to pull my hair out. But I love what I'm doing and who I'm helping. And then the impact that I've made. You know, a lot of my clients on the email marketing side and the life insurance and financial planning side have changed their lives in the time that we've been working together,
Mhm.
and been able to really touch other people's lives through their stories and their emails, and through when it comes to personal finances, like actually seeing their wealth grow. So those are the three legs, and multiple businesses. But Lord help me, 2024, it'll be a lot easier to explain.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you've been so efficient with it too. I mean, I know I reached out, and then of course we started talking, and I saw you on LinkedIn, and just how much you've built, and even hearing the story now. So, have you seen that there is a connection to the type of client? So, when you got started and you first started with RRD and the investing side, before growing into insurance, and then going after the purpose of money and writing and doing all of that stuff, did you kind of see like a connection between the same clientele, like it was a definitely a persona you were going after, or did you just see that it opened up as you started to open up new services?
It opened up, but I also a few years ago, 2020, when my business exploded. Go figure. We have a pandemic. Unfortunately, people are dying. Everybody wants life insurance. So 2020, my business expanded significantly, and I found myself growing from referrals. And I still tend to get a lot of business from referrals. People like working with me, and I'm so grateful for that. But I really do go above and beyond to educate first. I'm not here to sell a product. I am here to educate people on their personal finances and building a legacy so that they can leave something behind. And that was always my passion. So when someone decides to get a product through me or to work with me on the estate planning or the life insurance, that was a bonus, you know, but I wanted to provide a good experience. And I feel that that really helps my business grow. Recommendations, working with the same people, friends, family, other relatives. And I really have only gotten to the point, I think in the last 2 years, where now maybe 10 to 20% of the business comes from social media. But most of my business was like, hey, I worked with her. She's great. You should work with her too.
Yeah.
And now to have that social media presence and to have people come to me for life insurance has been rewarding because that's definitely a great source of leads I didn't know, people I didn't know. But the email marketing business built the same way, referral based business for 2 to 3 years, and not having to look for clients. Now people are hearing about me and they want to work with me. And so that's really been a blessing. But I would say I did put effort into building what we call avatar, right? Like, who
Mm-hmm.
do I want to work with? So I do mostly focus on women of color, between 25 and 39 years old, but I have male clients, I have married clients, I have single clients. So don't think I don't work with men. It's just I've chosen to prioritize women because I do feel like, my mom raised me mostly on her own because my dad was in the military for
Mm-hmm.
22 years and they were divorced. So I had my summers with him and I had my years with her, right? And my mom was also a full-time entrepreneur. So her business fluctuated a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Some days we had a lot of money, some days not so much.
Yeah.
And so I just witnessed women expected to build wealth, sometimes making less than their male counterparts, and all while trying to take care of their parents, their children, and elsewhere. So I wanted to help women who traditionally make less still be able to build more. And
Right.
that's why I've chosen women of color as my target audience. So I know that's like a long answer to your question, but it's genuinely how I got here, and how I ended up working with so many similar people, but I've also been able to work with different people too.
Yeah, and it's cool because it's not just a necessarily like a target profile, like you said, for life insurance. It was what was happening in the economy at the time with everything else
Mm-hmm.
that was going on, and then you're super passionate about the target audience that you want to actually go and help because of the way you were raised, and I think that's inspiring and probably a note that a lot of people should probably take from. But I you you you've been through a lot with the businesses. You've started up a couple. You've seen them from the very beginning all the way to what you have now. So one of the questions that we always go through is being overwhelmed in personal finance. So I think this is very fitting for you. Is you've handled all this stuff very well. So what kind of advice would you give to somebody who really just takes a look at all of this, a Roth IRA in high school, for example, and says, this is overwhelming. This is a lot. Like, what would you say this is where you can start or get going with? And if they're overwhelmed, this is what I've done.
Yeah, so my first thing is like know where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just like taking a moment to do a reality check. And when I mean know where you are, I'm not saying like, oh, I opened my bank account app and I know I have $20 in the bank. I can go get Starbucks. But more so like, what is the big picture? Where do you have
Mm-hmm.
all the money? Where's the money coming from? How much is coming in? And then how much are you actually spending? And that type of review sometimes requires people to look in several places, especially if you have multiple bank accounts. Maybe you started out with the bank that your parents were at, but then you went off to college where that bank wasn't there. Now you have another bank and you have this part-time job where you're getting this paycheck going to this account, and then you have this other full-time job where you have this check going to this account.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think before you get overwhelmed, like, just take a minute to brain dump. Where is everything? What is everything? Do I have credit cards? Do I have personal loans, student loans? What are my bills? And put those on a piece of paper. Just dump, dump, dump all the things you know to be true. And I say no to be true because sometimes when you see the actual bank statements, the reality is put in front of you that you thought you were spending $100 a month on Starbucks, but you're probably spending two. So that's when it gets the reality check part. But let's brain dump.
Yeah.
And then once you do the brain dump, let's try to make some organization out of the chaos. So trying to look at actual bank statements and group your expenses into categories: rent, or essential housing expenses, utilities, my car expenses, what's my insurance, what's my gas. Can you make sense of all of this? Can you total it up? And then does it even equal what you need to live? Like,
Mm-hmm.
look at what your life's costing you, look at what your paychecks say you're bringing in, is the mathing? Are you at a positive number left at the end of the month, or are you at a negative number at the end of the month? And always remember to include your credit card purchases, because some
Mm,
people assume that they're doing really well because they have money in the bank, but they're not taking into account that charges they put on the credit card that they didn't pay in full. So technically you are over exceeding your monthly, because the credit card is what's kind of helping you bridge the gap. But when you're able to see all of that, that's when you can make real decisions on what to attack first. And I have always been a huge and honest advocate for be real with yourself. If you're not making enough money, ask yourself why. Is it because you haven't asked for a raise? Is it because you are in the wrong job?
mhm,
Right? Some people make the biggest pay jumps by changing jobs, by negotiating their salary at the beginning of a new job, or by asking their existing employer for a raise. So do those things. If that's not an option for you, is it something you can fix by getting more education? Maybe getting a degree or a certificate can help you demand the higher salary. But whatever it is, like, let's be clear, are you currently making enough? And
mhm.
if you're not, how do we fix that? Do we do a side hustle? Do we go back to school? Obviously, I had a side hustle for many years. I worked for the government for 15 years, but I had my businesses quietly being built in the background, until they got to a point where they could replace my salary. So I'm also a big fan of, like, get a side hustle, be a
Yeah,
virtual assistant, create a business, put the skills you do in your 9 to 5 to use outside of your 9 to 5,
yeah.
and see if that can help you provide the income that you're missing.
Yeah, that's there's so much stuff in there, and
Yeah,
my
sorry,
one
I'm
no, that's perfect. I
packing it.
loved that. The one of the best parts too, though, is what you're saying about basically being transparent with yourself. And I see a lot of influencers and people that talk through this about only focusing on the side hustle part, which I know you just mentioned it, but you addressed in a really important part, and it's figuring out why you're not making more money. And that the only way to really create wealth is you have to, of course, cut your expenses or increase income. And at the end of the day, you can only cut expenses so far. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you bump up your W-2 income? You change
Mm-hmm.
jobs. I love that. That's so true. And I don't think a
Yeah.
lot of people talk about that as much, because everyone wants to, especially the fire community, everyone wants to get over to side hustle, start your own business, but you got to start somewhere
Yeah.
realistically. So
Yeah. And you
that's,
have to be honest. Like, you have to ask yourself that question, so you'll know, is it a me? Am I spending too much? Or
yeah,
is it like I don't make enough?
yeah,
And that is the reality. And I don't think it's all about cutting out your avocado toast and your Starbucks. Like,
yeah.
I'm a huge fan of, we work really hard. We should be able to enjoy life too. And I don't want to work just to save. And I also want to be able to understand, like, I am enjoying life now because tomorrow's not promised, but I'm still
Mm,
saving for the future too. And I know you can do both of those things at the same time.
yeah,
It might take you longer, but I think it's the better way to do it, so you're happy on your journey.
yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the fire movement, and I support it, because I definitely left my government job early. But I also am doing it in an expensive city. So I
Hmm.
have to be realistic. Like, yes, I could have moved to cheaper places in the US to raise my kids, but my husband's job is here. The best schools for my special needs son are here. There are, my home is here. There are a lot of reasons on why I'm just going to continue to pay the higher cost of living to live in the DC, Virginia area versus somewhere else. But I'm still going to have to find a way to make fire for myself in that path. And so in my situation, in my husband's situation, we made a conscious decision to take those higher paying jobs,
Hmm.
which we got the education for. And I also want to let people know, it doesn't always require education. I personally got a master's degree because my job paid more for it, and
Hmm.
and I got someone else to pay for it. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But my husband, He has an undergraduate degree. He has never pursued higher education and he makes more than me. So I do want to emphasize, like, when you find the right path, which in his case, he took IT and consulting and ran
Oh
with
yeah.
it, he got the money he deserved and he spent less to do it because he went to a public Florida institution.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's a
I went to
strong
a
message.
private one. So everyone assumes it's not, like I said, even though I said education might be a way to make more money, it's not necessary for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But there is some value in picking the right path. So, and if you are like me and you're in a more expensive city, you're going to have to be more creative about it. But I think it's still possible.
Yeah. And that's actually a really solid segue. You've already hit on a couple of really good points, but solid segue into your hot take on personal finance. What would you share with everybody that, or maybe part of the message that you like to share regularly? And I mean, I've already gathered a couple of really, I wouldn't even call hot takes, just really strong points that I personally also agree with, especially on the education piece. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you got?
Man, so my hot takes. First one is if you're like me, you don't leap into full time entrepreneurship, you build over time. So I
Mm,
saved before I left. I looked at how much I wanted to make and how much we needed to spend. And I made the decision strategically. But I will say, like, one of the things that I did, for example, is I took a month off of my regular job to be a full time entrepreneur to test it out. I also had the business pay me for several times and not use my regular paycheck to make sure we could afford to live, right?
that's cool.
So setting up these systems where you're kind of simulating life as a full-time entrepreneur, and if those simulations didn't work, I probably would still be working, right?
Yeah.
Because that would have been the test that you're not there. But in the same light, once I made the leap, I still had to have some experiences, hiring a team, delegating work, being responsible for other people. Oh my God, that is stressful. It continues to be something that gives me heart palpitations, but in prayer, I make payroll every time.
Yeah.
But I would say, what are my other hot takes? Finances can be fun.
Mm,
I'm actually, my oldest is 13 and we're working through his green light debit card and wise decisions. We're also working through helping him build credit by, he's an authorized user on our credit cards, but he does not have his credit cards to use on a regular basis. So trying to parent and also teach finances to kids, I think you need to start early. I think you need to start by setting an example, and having money conversations with your kids. Because I remember there was a point where my son thought if you swipe it, it always gets approved. And I had to explain to them, no, money has to be on the other side.
yeah.
Or it doesn't work. So, teaching kids, and I think it's even more important to teach these things now because we do have a swipe society.
Hmm.
And so many people are like, if they're not swiping a debit card, they're swiping a credit card, and they just feel like the money never runs out.
Yeah.
So those are my hot takes on personal finance.
That's a really good one, and it's I was just talking with my girlfriend about not just money conversations, but how do you educate children on that? Because I think my education was slightly different when I was growing up with money as well, and so to hear like how do you set these great foundations for somebody who might not even have any experience or perspective on having to pay their own bill, or like you just said, like it's a swipe culture. But even yeah, as a child, elementary school, like you see that happen, and you're like, yeah, okay, this is cool. Mom and dad work, but not really sure where the bank account's funding this card. It's never ending. So that's a really solid hot take as
Yeah,
well.
it was so funny. My friend posted on Twitter the other day, like, is this how you write a check? And it was a picture of someone who'd written like pay to car 1984 Cressida or whatever, right? Like what they were buying
Yeah,
and then the amount, and they signed it. And obviously it was a joke. That's not how
yeah,
you write a check. But it made me think about when I was a kid and I used to have to take my own lunch money to school. My mom would have to give me checks and I would fill them out and I would have to write the check, put it in the ledger, put the amount, subtract it from the balance available. And so I knew how to balance a checkbook at like
that's so
7,
cool. Yeah,
but now we don't write checks. I have some interestingly enough, but I rarely use them. And I remember I did have to mail a check to someone when my son was younger, and he was like, "Mom, what are you doing? What's that paper? What's the stamp?" Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? So I do feel like there are some things we used to do, and it was a teaching mechanism. Even if we didn't realize that's what we were doing, I was
Yeah.
trying to get lunch money, and my mom was teaching me how to balance a checkbook, but those skills are not being translated or
Oh,
taught. And so
100%.
I do have some anxiety about the next generation, but I appreciate the apps that are out there trying to make finances modern,
Yeah.
with debit cards for kids and apps for kids and Apple Pay and other things. But we just have to be careful, and we
Yeah.
have to like remind kids about the math and the money behind the actual swipe. So,
Yeah. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting ready for it. So
all right, well,
that's
get ready. I mean,
yeah.
look, nieces, nephews, cousins, everybody needs to know. So,
Yeah. 100%. Well, before we sign off today, what is the best way for everybody watching, listening to get access to you, reach out to you, contact you?
I would love for everyone to check out my website, thepurposeofmoney.com. You can connect with me, have a free consultation. We can even hang out on my podcast, The Purpose of Money, or check out the blog. If you are into social, my favorite spot is Instagram. Follow me at The Purpose of Money. I hang out there giving free tips on how to build your finances through investing, real estate, and life insurance. Otherwise, everything else is at The Purpose of Money. And I'm on Twitter as well, where I'm on LinkedIn under Acquania Escarne. So just check me out.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. Everybody watching, if you have any questions, comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Let us know on anything that you want to reach out to Aquani about, or just do it yourself, of course. Hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. Thanks again, Aquania.
Thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.